I'm Indy Neidell.
I'm Spartacus Olsson.
And I'm Anna Deinhard.
And today we are here for another Fireside chat, although we are not at a Fireside. We are in the Rise of Hitler set because that is what we were shooting most recently.
Oh, and today's episode is dedicated to Adam Jansson from Småland.
Of course.
If you know, then you know.
So, the format of this is that Indy and I ad-lib various information about World War II based on questions composed by James and Anna, who is going to ask us the questions. And I think we're going to be talking about why the Italians invaded Greece and things like that today. Is that correct?
You are very correct indeed. And if I may, I would like to start with the first question. Are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Yeah, okay.
Ready.
All right, Adam.
So, how ready for war were the Italian armed forces when Mussolini decided he wanted part of France?
They were not ready. That's the symbol. They were not ready. Even in 1938, 1939, Mussolini had told Hitler, Count Ciano had told Mussolini repeatedly that they were not ready for war. Of whatever 79 divisions, I think 18 were fully equipped. And he bragged about having 8 million bayonets and things like that, but they only had like 1.7 million, people. They were not. There's no other way around it. The Italian army was not ready for war in East Africa, in North Africa, in Greece, in France. It was not ready for war.
Out of all the armies of World War II, all of them get made fun of in different ways, and the French get made fun of very unfairly for being, cheese-loving peace monkeys and all that. But with the Italians, it's sort of deserved, isn't it?
Again, as we said
not because
before,
the soldiers
are
bad.
fine, and the equipment was great, and for what it was, but they were under-equipped, under-supplied, undermanned. The logistics were terrible. They didn't have enough of anything. They had been in a state of demobilization, and Mussolini was aware of this. They did. Okay, this is the army. This is not the navy. Italy had a decent sized navy, and they had 100 and something submarines, even in just the Mediterranean. And I know on paper, the French and British Mediterranean force was actually smaller but that's just the Mediterranean force, and that's on paper. Because what Italy lacked and became a real problem was aircraft carriers and naval aircraft. And as we saw through the war, that became a real big thing. But
I wasn't intending to say that the Italian soldiers were somehow bad, because they were just like any other soldier. They're all the same.
Yeah.
But the army as a whole was a catastrophe.
Yeah, it was a catastrophe.
So, we go to the next question. How strong was the French Maginot Line on the border with Italy?
Oh, Maginot Line, that only was only on the French.
Shut up! Well, I'm sure there's some of you watching this that goes, there was no Maginot. Okay, again, the Maginot Line went from the English Channel all along the border of France, all through the Alps, all down to the Mediterranean, and down into Africa.
It just skipped that little bit of water there, but otherwise it went through more or less all of Sahara. That's
But talk about, you want to say a few words about this one?
So fact of the matter is that it was very strong, but it wasn't strong because it had a whole load of fortresses. It had some really, really strong fortresses.
But this is why partly why the myth arises, because there were not lots of fortresses specifically.
And why were there not a lot of fortresses? Well, it's really simple. It's in the mountains, so you don't really need them, because these are impassable or unpassable geographical blockers. It's basically the whole Alps are in the way, and they make a fortress. So what the French did was that they reinforced the choke points in the valleys and at the passes and all of those places. And in those places was extremely strong.
Yeah.
And we saw that as well.
Even had I been the German army, I would hesitate to attack into France from there.
Oh, this is terrible. It's probably one of the... Actually, it's probably better defended than the German border at this point.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because of that, because of the geography, because
like 40,000 Frenchmen easily held off more than twice the number of Italians around Monaco, too, because,
how do you get through?
Terrain, yeah.
You just don't get through.
You have to attack at this place. So defend at this place. Great.
Yeah, and not only that, what you have to think about is that it's really easy to set up an enfilade. An enfilade is when you have, you're firing from the side so crosswise. Supporting. It's really easy because you've got the high ground. right? They have to pass through the low ground. And you can set your defenses up on the high ground. So they did that. And they also dug tunnels through the mountains. They're still there. Tunnels through the mountains where they then set up bunkers and connections. Yeah, lots of discos.
Yeah.
So the French are known for their dancing.
I'll be like, are we going to fight the Italians? Ah, oui, but tonight we dance.
Do you think they do the safety dance?
They do not. They do not do the swastika
Oh, no,
dance.
that's the German.
But tonight it is Galois and dance. Okay. I guarantee there is an underground nightclub in one of those tunnels today.
I bet you.
Guarantee.
You know that I used to go to the catacombs a lot when I was a wee teenager.
did? Okay,
yeah, I did,
cool.
in Paris, because not the touristy ones, but the actual 170 kilometers of tunnels that are under Paris.
Yeah.
And we actually had parties down there.
Cool,
Yeah,
cool.
It was cool.
Oh, the skulls.
Not among the skulls. The skulls are in the touristy part. It's a long story. There are skulls down there as well, but I don't want to get into that.
So, were Mussolini's overambitious territorial claims in France a hindrance to Hitler as the Germans began to negotiate their armistice with the French?
No, I don't think so. Because from all indications, any negotiations the Italians were doing were separate from the German and French negotiations. Germany was going to get what it wanted from France anyway. Yeah. Remember, the Germans didn't plan to just occupy France and take over France. That was not until at the end of 1940 when they were starting to be worried about the Mediterranean because of Mussolini's idiot moves, when they had plans for Operation Attila to Gibraltar and the ports of the Mediterranean ports. But Hitler was going to get everything he wanted from the French. Hitler didn't. Mussolini's demands were Mussolini's demands.
So, I mean, on the French side at this point, there are really two camps, right? It is the camp that then congeals around Charles de Gaulle and want to continue fighting some way outside of the country. And then it's the one that comes around Pétain and Hunzinger and Laval. And they don't really want to go on fighting. As we see from their trials after the war, they actually sympathize so much with the German cause that it's hard to see how they would have gone on through the war without putting up resistance towards the French war effort anyway. So it's not a difficult negotiation. France is beaten. There's a sizable amount of people in France that are pro-German or pro-Nazi, not pro-German, pro-Nazi. And the part down in the south where Italy is fooling around is kept pretty much in check by Hitler anyway.
And while the Germans are going to take the spoils of victory, they're not going to put 1 million people in France to occupy it militarily like they later.
They don't need to, because Pétain is doing that job for them.
One thing I'd like to point out as a side note here, we think of Hitler as Hitler was a dictator who's in charge. What he said went. In late 1940, that was so not the case. No. That in the same 1 week period, he could not get Pétain, he could not get Franco, and he could not get Mussolini in the same week to not do what he wanted to do. He was trying to get Franco, and Franco was like, trying to get Pétain to declare war on the British, and then you'd get 1.5 million French soldiers out of POW and have a whole army. And he's like, yeah, we want concessions. And he's saying to Italy, Mussolini's invading Greece, and Hitler's like, can you do this? And Mussolini's like, eh. So for all the power, you don't have control over these other countries. People forget that.
It's one of the things that I see a lot of the time when I look at what people comment about any war, and especially about World War II. Is that everyone underestimates the size of what's going on. And we look at a map and, it's easy. The world fits here on our table, or at the most back on our wall back there. Not today, but, normally you have a whole world on the wall. But when you actually go down there into the world where we're sitting right now, it's a big place. And 1 million people. I mean, we worked out at some point the lake where we live. If you take all of humanity and you stack them on top of each other like sardines, you can fit, and you'll still have place. All of the 8 billion people who live in the world, right?
That's a project for next year.
So now think about that. So that was 8 billion. That's 8,000 million. Now you have 1.5 million German soldiers, right? If you think about it, that means that they would only cover barely the bottom of this lake here. How are you going to have them occupy all of Europe at once? It takes time. You need to build up administration. You need to build up an occupation force. All of these things take time. So, no.
And you can. And a lot of countries said no to Hitler, and well, worked out fine for them. Franco,
Yeah.
So
there you are. So no is the answer. It was not a hindrance.
People often say that Mussolini wanted to recreate the Roman Empire, but what were his actual territorial ambitions in Europe and Africa? Did he even have clear ambitions?
He had clear ambitions, but it's when people say that Roman Empire thing, that's not true. A Mediterranean empire and the Roman Empire are two different things. The Roman Empire extended to Britain and had Gaul and went much further into the Middle East and Turkey. And Mussolini, while he might have thought, hey, if they give me Turkey, that's great, he had no intentions of attacking Turkey.
Well, he used the words himself, but he didn't use them literally. It was propaganda. It was hyperbole. He was talking about the pride of the supposed Italian heritage, which is nonsense anyway. But this is what it was all about. But his plans were very concrete, both in Africa and in Europe.
Italian Somaliland was the land in the Horn of Africa that Italy had, was given to Italy at the end of the First World War, and having ports along the Indian Ocean and the south end of the Red Sea is a real strategic thing that people forget about. It was not an unreasonable dream to one day have an empire that included North Africa and Egypt, which Mussolini's plan was to take over Egypt, but secretly. Like the Egyptian government would still be running, so nobody would know that it was actually running under Italian control. That was his plan. That was something he wanted to do. Greece was more foolish, but again, we've talked about it before. He didn't have the armed forces to do all of this in 1940 or not. Well, at any point, yeah.
So was Mussolini's invasion of Greece the equivalent of a baby throwing his toys out of the pram? Essentially, the argument goes Mussolini was upset that Hitler had base troops in Romania, part of Italy's sphere of influence, without telling him, and he wanted to do something to assert his dominance in the region.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. I mean, you can't really say it any other way. I mean, this is one of the backsides of the whole idea of fascism and ultra nationalism or chauvinist nationalism. Is this belief in that you need to assert yourself in the world, not just on an economic and geopolitical level, but also on an honor level.
Now, I mean, Hitler and Mussolini were obviously tight allies. It's very obvious why Germany wanted to put troops in Romania. It wasn't just you didn't need 38 divisions or whatever to protect the oil fields from no one. It's because, of course, already in the fall of 1940, Germany was planning on invading the Soviet Union. If Mussolini saw those troops there, whether or not Hitler had told him, which I don't think he had, then it would become pretty obvious. It was just dumb. Come on, you got to see, Germany they'd taken Poland, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, mighty Luxembourg, France. They'd done a whole lot of damage to Britain and stuff, and Italy was just there. Yeah, of course. Mussolini was like that. He was.
And it's the silliness of autocracy. We see Hitler and Stalin doing similar things throughout the war.
The Greek invasion was colossally stupid. What would have been a great thing to do would be to take Malta when they could still take Malta. And Mussolini even prioritized attacking Egypt over Malta. Taking Malta would have denied, you mentioned the Navy, would have denied the Mediterranean basically to the Allies.
Was the initial Italian failure in Greece more down to the weakness or more incompetence of the Italian forces or the tenacious defense of the Greeks?
Well, it was both, but I'd say in terms of not incompetence, in terms of insufficient men and equipment on this hand, and tenacious defense of the I'd say 70-30. Because the Greek defense in the Pindus Mountains was great. The Greek defenders were great. They also were fighting for something. The average Italian soldier, why would invade Greece? What did he have against Greece? It was only Mussolini that wanted to invade Greece. If you're a soldier like, hey, we're going to invade Greece, they're our enemies. Are they?
The force multiplier, that's what it's called, force multiplier, when we're talking about morale, is so much higher when you are on the receiving end of an invasion. And it really means that there's no hard and fast number you can put to it, but you can easily say that you're twice as motivated if you take twice with a pinch of salt. And that is the case. And now we go back to the whole thing about geography again, right? Greece is not an easy country to invade.
Oh, not from the mountains anyway.
No. There's a lot of places for people to hide in and to come down and strike with guerrilla warfare. And that's exactly what happened.
And also the fact that even Mussolini's own, competent or incompetent, they were right, even his own command, when he decided in mid-October that he was going to invade Greece, because, the Battle of Britain was, things still looking okay for Germany. He was going to invade. They said, well, it's going to take 3 months at least to get that many divisions over to Albania to invade. He launched the invasion 11 days later. It was woefully unprepared. I mean, it was only a matter of days before the Greeks stopped them and drove them out of the country.
Okay, so...
And of course, that's what then Hitler had to decide to intervene. And that's when Operation Marita was decided, all his flurry of directives to invade Greece. Yeah.
So would you say that Mussolini's ambitions may have been over the top, but did he directly interfere in military operations in the same way that Hitler later would?
No, he did not. He did actually leave that to his, and I'm glad you said Hitler later did, because Hitler wasn't doing that at all so much now as he was in 1944. I mean, when if you ran an army group and you made an operational order, you had to give Hitler time to see it, to see if he said, no, don't do that. No, Mussolini didn't do that. He didn't interfere.
Mussolini, don't you think he was more of a theater guy than an actual politician?
Yeah, and he asked for advice. He did ask for advice. He had decided to do this, but he asked for advice on how to go about it. And feel like,
and
well,
he listened to
them
as well.
Yeah.
I mean, his big thing was really, and I know it sounds a little stupid almost, but that's what it is. He was the man. He was a man of political theater. He was not just theatrical, the same way that Hitler was, but it was also, a lot of it was posing. A lot of it was, he spoke a lot about this. He spoke about the pride of the Italians need to be restored to a greater glorious era and stuff like that. And all autocrats do that, but Mussolini really carried it through as well. A lot of pomp and circumstance.
I mean, but those, failing in North Africa and East Africa and Greece nearly led to the downfall of Mussolini already in 1941. I mean, Hitler wasn't just propping him up because they were allies. Hitler was propping him up because Italy changing governments. What if they changed to a nice democratic pro-British government? Hitler couldn't have that right below him suddenly. So, but that actually, the failed invasion of Greece and not hitting Malta and things like that, that's, the war before was a Northern European war, and Hitler was not interested in Greece and was not interested in Yugoslavia for what they were. Mussolini's grandiose vision is what turned it into a southern and a big Mediterranean war, because Hitler had no intention of sending an Africa Corps to Africa, not until he had to, or until he thought he had to. So the Greeks and the Yugoslavians can thank Mussolini for the Germans invading them.
And I think how incredibly close it came to that Mussolini fell after all of these useless adventures that he went on really also illustrates the difference between him and Hitler, because there was the Council of Fascists, and the Council of Fascists actually had a say, not just militarily, but also politically. Mussolini was a front man, and he was, as I say, the theater man, the man on the stage and all of that. But it was really much more of a classic fascist, corporatist environment where many people were taking the decisions together, and he was carrying them forward on a public stage.
So how do we explain Mussolini's overconfidence in his nation's abilities? Are all fascist leaders prone to imperial overreach? We see the same with Hitler. Although Germany at least had more firepower to back it up, was it also a case of Mussolini having a completely contemptuous attitude towards his foes?
Well, it's not, okay, while you do see this with all fascist regimes, it's not just fascists. I mean, look at the beginning of the First World War. You had all the emperors and kingdoms who were not fascist places saying, we're going to be home by Christmas. Didn't matter if you had a democratic government or if you had lived in an empire, whatever. We're going to win. Our country's the best. Our guys are the best. We have this. Was Mussolini contemptuous of his foes? he wasn't contemptuous so much of the British, because he knew what they were capable of. A little, and not so much of the French, but a bit, but absolutely contemptuous of any opposition he was going to meet among the kings of rifles and the corps made up of Africans. Sure, absolutely.
I think you can easily say that this is, like Indy just said, this is not unique to fascism, but there's a common trait between all of the things that you just counted up. And as a matter of fact, you can add Stalin to that list as well. And that is chauvinist nationalism. Chauvinist nationalism, where you believe that your state, for ideological reasons, for racial reasons, for political reasons, whatever, where you believe your state to be greater than other nations, then you run a real risk to making that belief into more than a belief and making it into dogma. And that
when ideology is more important than facts, or the basic facts of life, when you could maybe see that your army is not capable of doing this, but you have this ideology, so you roll with that instead. So.
Yeah.
What did Mussolini and Hitler really think of each other by the time the war was underway? How had their relationship changed?
Well, it's funny because even in spite of all the Italian setbacks and that Germany had to really come to the rescue in Greece and North Africa, Hitler still, when he'd meet with Mussolini, he still talked to Mussolini. Okay, he didn't talk down to him. This is Hitler, who was dismissive of a lot of people and stuff. And even during the invasion of Sicily and then the invasion of Italy, and then when Mussolini fell for the first time, it was Hitler that was like, okay, I'll send Germany down and we'll invade Italy and we'll prop Mussolini back up again. He could have had a different front man. He could have.
The Hitler-Mussolini relationship was never really contentious from the German side. It was contentious from the Italian side, in as much as the Mussolini thought in the beginning that Hitler was just an Austrian corporal who didn't know what he was doing,
right,
and had no respect for him whatsoever, which when they met the first time really, really pissed Hitler off. But it didn't piss him off enough for them to break. Over the years, Hitler, of course, became stronger than Mussolini, and they were both great believers in strong men. And Mussolini's admiration for Hitler grew, and Hitler never abandoned his admiration for Mussolini's theater, because that's the whole.
And Mussolini did get a bit of a little brother complex, even because he felt like he should have been the big brother from the beginning.
Sure.
So, and I want to point out something. The Hitler-Mussolini relationship, that's the name for me and Sparty's upcoming early 90s industrial noise group, right?
And the first album is going to be called Contentious.
Contentious. Oh! Yeah.
Nice. So,
and we're gonna do an industrial musical. It's gonna be called Grease, but it's gonna be spelled different. It's gonna.
Oh my god, dude. But I would love to see that.
Yeah. That's actually I would love to see that. Can't lie. Okay.
So, last question. Could you compare Mussolini's Italian fascism with Hitler's Nazism? What about Francisco Franco's fascism?
Well, so all of these three.
Oh, I guess you're answering this one, huh?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but this is, right in my wheelpark.
Yeah.
Wheelhouse, sorry. Ballpark, wheelhouse? Yeah, anyway.
Ballhouse.
Ballhouse. No. So, okay. Very interesting question. So, yes and no. All three of them have very, very common traits when it comes to, for instance, the idea of economy. So they're all corporatists. That is to say that they focus the economy into a small group of elites that can control things going on in that direction. They're all three ultranationalist. But they are then also very, very different. They're different in as much as Franco is very protective. He is not at all expansionist. He doesn't have any interest in that.
Catholic.
Mussolini is Catholic as well,
sure.
but he's not expansionist. He wants to. That's why they stay neutral throughout the war, because they don't want to take Spain beyond its border. So they just want to keep Spain.
And they
fascist.
needed an American and British food and supplies and money.
So they're staying put where they are. The Italians are like the Germans, expansionist, but their form of fascism is rooted truly in nationalism. There's a certain amount of racism in it, But it's more than anything, it's nationalism. And then we get to the Nazis. Now, the core tenet of Nazism is anti-Semitism. And the belief in a Jewish cabal that tries to control the world.
Can't separate those.
It cannot separate those. And that is what makes Nazism completely different than the other three. It's expansionist, like the Italian. Sure. It is nationalist, like both of them, right? And it's corporatist, like all three. But the anti-Semitism is what defines Nazism. So when people just use the slur, "Oh, you're such a Nazi,"
well, you have to look down, and Slavs are second-class citizens, but Jews aren't even human. Yeah. So that's the
so when people use the slur, "You're such a Nazi," what they really mean to say, if they are describing somebody who has fascist beliefs, is fascist, because you cannot be a National Socialist without being an anti-Semite. It doesn't work. That's how it is. So these are the differences. But, a lot of it, they're militarist, all three. A lot of similarities, but there's that one big, big difference.
Yep.
So that were all the questions. I thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Anna. That was fun. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sparty.
Thank you, Indy.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time for another fireless fireside chat. Excelsior!